How's it going, everyone? This is Paul Garcia of ProjectSpurs.com bringing you the Project Spurs Vidcast after the San Antonio Spurs' second game of the season, where they defeated the Sacramento Kings 102-94 on Thursday night in Sacramento, where the Kings opened their new arena. Be sure to check us out at ProjectSpurs.com. Follow us on Twitter at Project Spurs, and also follow my account at Paul Garcia PS. Let's go ahead and jump into the game. Your top three Spurs performers for the evening were Kawhi Leonard, Dwayne Dedmon, and David Lee. Kawhi, followed up his 35-point game against Golden State with a 30-point night, 21 shots, 3 rebounds, 5 steals, 5 assists, made 7 of 7 free throws in 35 minutes of play. What else can you say? Balanced game again, hitting the three-pointer, getting to the free throw line, hitting the mid-range shots, calming the pace down the stretch. In the third quarter, when the Spurs were really making their comeback after trailing by 11, which we'll jump into a little bit later, Kawhi had this sequence where he had 2 back-to-back steals on one of the Kings' backcourt players, I believe it was Ben McLemore. And then the fourth quarter, there was a sequence where you kind of know that this is his team. You really saw it. It was down in crunch time when the Spurs were pulling away. Parker was bringing the ball up the floor, but you could see Pop yelling at Parker to pass the ball to Kawhi, let him execute the final possession. And sure enough, Kawhi had it, drives up on the defender, and pulls up for a very lengthy mid-range jumper and nails the shot. So that's when not only does he have the confidence to take that shot, but his coach has that confidence to tell Parker, hey, give him the ball. This dude needs to shoot the ball. He's basically their closer now. If they're going to win or lose, it's going to be through his determination and his outset. So another monster game for Kawhi. Just throwing it out there now. 2 games in, he has 65 points and 10 steals 2 games into the season. The next guy was Dwayne Dedmon. Really good game for him, considering who they were playing. As I had mentioned in the last vidcast, that Boogie Cousins, DeMarcus Cousins, was going to be a big matchup for them, for San Antonio, a big test for them. And sure enough, with Pau Gasol struggling, Dwayne Dedmon was the guy who answered the bell and came up and played some good defense in the third and fourth quarter for San Antonio. Dedmon finishes with 12 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 blocks in 24 minutes. Defensively, this is who he is. He's a really good help defender. Kind of gets in the way. When he's in one-on-one situations, he does tend to foul a little bit more. That's not a good matchup for him. But he's definitely better than Powell right now. Powell, Boogie was having his way with him early on in the game, and the Spurs really relied on Dedmon to kind of calm it down there. LaMarcus Aldridge was also in early foul trouble too, defensively. So Dedmon was there to be that rock for them down in the paint. And what was interesting was something that a scout had told SA.com. There was a piece, SI.com. There was a piece in SportsIllustrated.com recently, before the season began, where a scout spoke with the writer, and they talked about their observations on most of the NBA teams. And when it got to the Spurs section, they mentioned this one line that Dedmon would be a closer in a lot of close games for San Antonio just because of his defensive presence. And sure enough, 2 games into the season, they get in a close game, and it was Dedmon playing down the stretch. He provides rim protection consistently. He's quick enough to guard perimeter players. I remember in the first half there was a sequence where Aaron Aflalo tried to take him off the dribble, and he basically stopped the dribble penetration from Aflalo, who's a guard. And then on another sequence, Boogie tried to drive on him, and he got into the paint, but Dedmon was able to protect the rim without fouling, and Boogie ended up turning that ball over. So Dedmon had a really good night considering it's only his second game of the season. The other guy was David Lee, 12 points on 6 shots. 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 1 block in just 16 minutes. For me, this reminds me a lot about Boris Diaw. This is where he filled a lot of little gaps off the bench. The Spurs ran a lot of their offense through him with that second unit. He's very efficient in that. He even had one of Diaw's plays where the Spurs called a timeout in the second half. They used their corner hammer play, and it was actually Diaw used to deliver this pass to Patty Mills in the corner, and tonight it was David Lee delivering that pass right on the money. For 60 minutes doing all that production, that's really efficient. Like I said, LaMarcus Aldridge was in foul trouble tonight. He wasn't having the best of games, so it was good to see Lee get in there and really contribute for him. And again, Powell too had a rough night. So Lee and Dedmon really picked up for what the starters were missing tonight in the win for the Spurs. Okay, on offense, the Spurs, wasn't the best of shooting nights. 46%, 3-pointers didn't really go in, and some of this I'm going to give the Kings some credit. Head coach Dave Yeager, who coached the Grizzlies, he's a really good coach, really getting his guys. You can see it 2 games in that they're buying into a system. They're thinking defense first a lot of times. So it's not just that the Spurs missed shots; it's also that you have to give some credit to the Kings' defense. They were swarming, they were energetic, they were staying with shooters, they were running off screens, they were helping each other, anticipating where the ball was going a lot of times in that first half. So I would attribute that to poor shooting plus their defense. The Spurs still got to the line. That's going to be Kawhi Leonard again, 7 free throws. And then I think another guy we got to mention is Aldridge, because the first through third quarter he did have a rough shooting night. DeMarcus Cousins did a really good job playing him 1-on-1, so Aldridge wasn't getting that much help. The other day he had his way with the Golden State because they played a lot of undersized lineups. Draymond Green is smaller than Boogie Cousins, and so Aldridge had his way against Golden State. Well, tonight it was a challenge for him against Costa Kufas, against Boogie, and then there was some small ball lineups as well with the Kings. And it was a tough night, but in the fourth quarter, Aldridge did come through. He ended up scoring 11 points, 11 of his 16 points in the fourth quarter, and he got to the free throw line 6 times. So him and Kawhi were a big reason for those 24 free throws made. Passing the ball, despite the Kings' defense, the Spurs still were moving the ball pretty well. 23 assists on 36 field goals made, which is a 64% assist percentage, which is good. There's no one-on-one ball type being played right now. It's movement. It's people making their shots off of passes, not just taking it one-on-one and trying to beat a team by themselves. And keeping it very low. The turnovers, 10 turnovers for 11 King points. That's actually remarkable considering this is Lee and Dedmon's second game with the team. I mean, these are brand new players to the system, Powell as well, and these guys are taking care of the basketball. So this is going to help the Spurs stay in a lot of games. As I mentioned, they fell behind by 11 points earlier in the game, but they were able to make that comeback, and a big part of that was keeping the turnovers low. For a second night, the Spurs' bench, they did very well against Golden State. They scored 54, so against the Kings, they got it down to 43, so they outscored them 43-18. And really, this bench is coming together pretty quickly. The Spurs' starters again dug them in a hole. They were down by like 6 to 8 points, and it was the bench who came in and either and really chipped into that Kings lead, both in the first half and the second half. As I mentioned, it wasn't just Dedmon and Lee. In order for those two guys to score, somebody has to be moving the ball, and some of those guys were like Manu Ginobili, 8 points, 5 assists. Jonathan Simmons, 5 points, 3 assists, and then Patty Mills hit 2 threes as well. So the bench, that's good that since the starters really are having a rough time right now with Danny Green out, and Powell so far hasn't had a very, I'd say, comfortable fit just yet, because it's more so on the defensive end. The starters actually bailing the Spurs out. The starters out. The bench is actually bailing the starters out a lot of times right now. And the Spurs did end up, despite trailing by 11, they actually picked up an 11-point lead as well in the second half, which means that they were almost there to cover what the Vegas had them as 9-point favorites coming in. If you look at the percentage of their points, they mainly scored from the paint. 35% of their offense came from the paint. As we mentioned, the free throw line, and then the mid-range with Kawhi, Aldridge, some of those guys, and then the three-pointers didn't go in tonight, so only 18% of their offense came. So it was mainly the paint and the free throw area for San Antonio's offense. Defensively, the Spurs did hold the Kings to 40% shooting, and this is mainly more contributed to the second half, because in the first half, Sacramento walked into halftime shooting 51% from the field. Three-pointers, the Spurs kept them, the Kings aren't going to be known for taking a lot of threes, so they shot 6 of 20, 30%, not too bad. And then here's the big part, was the 32 field goals made, free throws made, should I say. Like I mentioned, DeMarcus Cousins, 37 points, 16 free throws tonight. Whenever he had Powell on him, he immediately attacked him. Powell could not, Powell basically looked helpless against him a lot of times. Boogie's just too athletic, too quick. He can drive on you from the perimeter. He can get the post up and spin off of you. He has the physicality, the size to get to the free throw line and earn calls. He also put Aldridge in a few rough situations as well. And then Rudy Gay as well also had a decent night getting to the free throw line. Even though he had 17 points, he didn't make all his shots. He did get 12 free throw attempts, and he actually put Kawhi in some foul trouble, where Kawhi finished the game with 5 fouls, but he managed to stay in. So Pop had to take him out a few times early. So the Kings are that one team that you kind of saw if they have a big presence who kind of gets the free throw line. Boogie was that guy. There's not many guys like that in the league these days, but still, that's something to watch for the Spurs, because outside of Gasol, it's got to be up to Dedmon. And an Aldridge to really contain those guys, because the Spurs don't have a Tim Duncan anymore there to be that physical presence who tries to shut these low post scorers down. On the boards, as I mentioned, the Kings play a lot more bigger lineups, so they play like Boogie, Costa Kufas, Willie Cauley-Stein. So the Spurs didn't have a huge advantage on the boards. Both teams grabbed 40 rebounds. The Kings did get 6 offensive boards, and they ended up with 15 second chance points on the night. The Spurs defensively forced another opponent into 16 turnovers. The Golden State turned the ball over 16 times, and so did Sacramento. And the Spurs really reaped the benefits of that, scoring 23 points off of those turnovers for Sacramento. In transition, San Antonio did a good job. They held the Kings to just 10 transition points. The previous night, Sacramento had blown out Phoenix, and a big part of that was their transition points. Sacramento scored 18 points against the Suns. If you watch their recap from the previous night, that was a lot of their plays were just throwing the ball on outlets. And the Spurs did a good job if they turned it over, or if they got back, or if from limiting in those outlets from Sacramento tonight by holding them to just 10 points. And then something I just wanted to note was the Spurs did hold a new season low, even though it's obviously only 2 games in. They actually held the Kings to 14 points, which for me it's a little bit surprising. When Duncan retired and you lost some of your familiarity off the bench as well, I thought that those days of the Spurs holding teams to under 15 points in a quarter might have been gone. But 2 games in, they've already held Golden State to 20 points in a quarter, and now 14 points for Sacramento defensively. Up next, the Spurs will host the New Orleans Pelicans in their season opener, Saturday, October 29th at 7 p.m. here in Texas, San Antonio. One guy to watch here is Anthony Davis. In New Orleans opening game, they played Denver Nuggets, where they lost by a few points on Wednesday. Something to note, though, is Davis's performance. The guy scored 50 points. Just listen to this line. He scores 50 points, grabs 16 rebounds, 7 steals, 5 assists, and 4 blocks. And if you thought Cousins was a handful for the Spurs, listen to how many times Cousins actually shot 22 times Thursday against San Antonio, and he only got to the free throw line 16 times. Davis against Denver shot 34 shots and had 17 free throws. So obviously, if Powell and Aldridge and Dedmon and Lee and all these guys, if they thought they were going to get an easy matchup just after dealing with Boogie, it's not going to be a fun time on Saturday when they have to deal with Anthony Davis. The plus for San Antonio, though, is that Boogie, you would say, has a better supporting cast, so it was hard to help off of him and really double team. So I think that you're going to see a little bit more double teaming on Davis, because the Pelicans right now, it doesn't look like Davis has a lot of structure and help behind him, so it might be a little bit easier to throw some double teams. I'm sure Pop will look at mixing it up a little bit defensively, throwing some different looks at him throughout that game. But definitely San Antonio is going to have their hands full with Davis on Saturday. Again, be sure to check out ProjectSpurs.com. Myself, I just wrote a recent piece on 4 pick and roll actions that the Spurs really used against the Warriors that were very effective, that they're probably going to use some of these different sets during the season. Colin Beckendorf just had a piece on Bryn Forbes detailing how what I really like about Colin's piece was that he really put forth pretty good expectations and projections of where Forbes is going to play, where he talks about how Forbes is going to play when Manu Ginobili or Tony Parker sit on certain nights, on some when they have big leads, stuff like that. Really check out Beckendorf's stuff. He throws some interesting stats in there for Forbes. And then Tom Petrini also has a film breakdown of just showing how Aldridge, Jonathan Simmons, and Kawhi Leonard were really dominant against the Warriors on Tuesday night in that premier game. So this is Paul Garcia signing off for the Project Spurs Vidcast.